Ready? Okay, good morning. Next up, we have Derek, who is going to talk about restaking is for everyone.
Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for coming. Yes, I'm talking about how restaking is for everyone, and that includes solo stakers. So first, I would like to just kind of talk about how restaking, what it can do is it can really democratize access and give additional rewards to all of the different people who are involved with staking currently. A few things to note before, I might be talking about Restaking Cloud or K2. Technically, Restaking Cloud is the network, K2 is the protocol, but I might use them interchangeably. A little bit about me, disclaimer, I am working with Restaking Cloud and part of BlockSwap Labs as well. Here's kind of what we're going to cover. We'll get into what we see as Ethereum strengths, define what we mean by safe assets, get into using native delegation, middleware, security reporters, all that. So what are we looking for in restaking? I think that that's really important for us to first address, and that is a way for everybody and anybody to be involved with restaking without altering any sort of operations or adding any additional risks to the Ethereum staking infrastructure. So when we look at ETH, there's hundreds and thousands of dApps, trillions of dollars settled every year. It really is this global settlement layer, and there's 870 validators. This is really where people want to be building. That's why restaking is coming into ETH. That is why people want to build on ETH. It is by far the most robust network there is. Now, when we kind of look at Ethereum's core strengths, we see that it really comes down to inclusivity, open access, avoiding centralizing entities, just really anything that can help it grow in any different way. Now, I think it's really important for us to kind of take a step back and define what a safe asset is to get a good understanding of where we're going with restaking. And there's different pillars to a safe asset. The first is that it needs to be low risk. It needs to be something where you're putting your assets somewhere and it's yielding, right? And you don't have to worry about anything external causing risk to these assets, similar to, say, like a government bond. Another thing to actually be a safe asset is the idea that you are yielding in the same currency that you're staking. If it's USD, you're going to want to get USD. If it's ETH, you want to get ETH. Other than that, you are really more or less yield farming for these different types of tokens. Now, once you get this sort of base layer and you get that safe asset, it's easy to underwrite that risk and you can build additional applications on the top of it. This is really the core pillar of where the monetary system is now. They get safe assets and they can build additional assets on top of this and keep reusing that capital. So, ETH validator is crypto's safe asset. And when we take a look at this, the solo staker is really the most vulnerable out of all the stakers. They could just be one person. It could be the majority of their assets, the majority of their net worth is in this validator. And when we're talking about restaking, we want to make sure that this person can be included without them feeling like they need to give up certain aspects or certain ideals of being a solo staker. We need to incentivize them just as much as we're incentivizing anybody else within the group. We need that user to continue to hold ownership of their keys, and we do not want their yield to be affected by any sort of third party. So let's protect the solo stakers. Let's make sure that they can get involved and get the same yields as everybody else. So just to kind of sum up where we are so far, we have Ethereum's core strengths. We want to keep these in mind anytime we're talking about anything around Ethereum. We have the largest settlement layer. We have crypto safe asset, and now on the top of that, we want to add restaking, and we need to do this tactfully. there's this concept of ETH at stake. And the whole idea of ETH at stake is that dexes, money markets, any sort of DeFi app layer can get access to the security of Ethereum without actually slashing any assets on the consensus layer. Right now, nobody can slash consensus layer assets besides the actual consensus layer. Anything that is slashing against them is more of a lien on some sort of withdrawal or is additional collateral with additional slashing. So currently nobody can slash besides the consensus layer, no matter what app you're running. So now what we want to try to do is offer this concept of ETH at stake while maintaining the idea of the safe asset. We want to make sure that people can get access to these yields, get access to whatever it might be, and we can do this through a concept called state replication. And what state replication does is it creates a real-time replicated version of the consensus layer asset so that it can be tracked on the execution layer. So now we have this concept of native delegation, and we have a native delegation bill of rights. We want to make sure that anybody and everybody who accesses restaking is able to do so in a way that's safe for them. They're not putting assets at risk, and they are able to have the freedom to choose anything they want to do. We want them to maintain full optionality, run any software they want, run clients, use DVT, use solo staking. It really should not matter when we're talking about restaking. Everything should be the exact same as it was before. So now we have what you put ETH at stake with the same concept of native delegation, and what we get is this ability for people to access different validators and different ETH at stake for their individual network, again, without being able to slash the underlying validator, because that's how Ethereum works. We want restaking to really map exactly how Ethereum works itself. Some key features that I want to run through as far as what is possible with native delegation. There's no need for withdrawal credentials. That means that people hold on to their assets. To actually get involved with native delegation, it's quite simple. Sign a transaction with the signing key. There's a few different ways to do this. There's through a web browser, which a lot of people aren't comfortable with, but that's okay. There's also a CLI where people can run and then basically just upload the proof. And once they're done with that, they can set their fee recipient address and they can start receiving ETH payouts for the restaking. Now, what's important to keep in mind here is that these validators are only able to maintain being part of that restaking network as long as they're maintaining a good quality validator in Ethereum. If they're not upholding everything that's good in Ethereum, they can no longer natively delegate. We really want to tie that connection together with these consensus layer assets. Now, with native delegation, to keep that idea of safe assets, there is no additional slashing risk to an ETH validator. Really, I'll get into this a bit later, but any sort of slashing or any sorts of payouts are handled at the pool level because you have middleware on one side, you have e-stakers on the other side, and this can be handled in the pool and not put that risk on these restakers who aren't exactly sure what software they're running or anything like that. So at the end of the day, people can keep the exact same business logic. If they are running for LSTs, they can continue running for LSTs. All validators are accepted, and this is really incentivizing this base layer. This is saying that node operators, whoever's holding the signing key, whoever's running the validator, that is who gets access to this. And again, this is all entirely on smart contracts, so there's no opportunity for a veto or anything like that, and it's completely deterministic and, again, passive for these stakers. So now, to get an idea of what's possible with restaking, we want to take a look at what would the progression be of assets that people can build. So from the onset, we have infrastructure, and I really think that a good analogy to this is the idea of the GPS, where the GPS originally for military use $300,000 product. I don't know, I'm making that number up. I'm sure it was super expensive when it first came. And it was just reused for military operations. That's really the infrastructure of where we're at when we're talking about restaking, right? Node operator networks, Oracle networks, really anything that is very fundamental. But as this moved up, they put that military device, they put it in a car, and people can finally find out where they're going, right? And this is very similar to the idea of a dApp layer, where people have different sorts of applications that they see a need for, and they can bring in restaking to solve those issues. Now, where I think this gets super, super exciting is once we get into native utility. Because native utility is now where the GPS is on the smartphone, every app is tracking your location, they're giving you relevant ads, they're doing whatever it is, you don't even think about it. And that's where restaking is going to get to. It's more closely related to, pinging an API point to access restaking, not where you need to go through this long process of getting additional software set up. It's just right there, available, simple to use. The middleware have a very easy time getting through this process, right? Because they can define any sort of slashing logic they want. And when I say slashing logic, if we go back here, slashing with infrastructure, that makes sense, but slashing is actually a good thing, where if somebody wants to use restaking and the backing of Ethereum for account recovery, and every time that they want to recover an account, there's a little bit of a slashing, that's actually a very positive thing. That means that it's working, means that account is recovered. So once a middleware defines what that is through a simple TypeScript type logic, they go into the dApp and they can choose which ETH or how much ETH that they want to borrow. And they can simply go in there, they say, I want to put up this much ETH, this much, because this is how much I want access to, and they will really just pay for services as they go. And because this is all smart contracts, this is all very symbiosis, people are able to modify the logic they want anytime. They can cancel anytime. They can come back and change things. They can add additional security, whatever it is that they want to do, but it scales with them very simply, and they don't need to talk to anybody. They just go to this app, and they're there. So really, there's two ways that middleware are able to pay for their service. There's one, they pay for interest to the restakers for how much ETH that they want, how much of the ETH at stake that they want. But then there's also the slashing and liveness. And this is more of the pay as they go type of service, where every time a call happens, they pay, I'll get into the reporters a bit later, but they pay for these reporters to verify different logic or have these different types of slashing. Now, the middleware could decide to pass these slashing risks onto a separate node operator set and not pay for them themselves, or they could have different people pay them every time that the service is run. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that are taking out that initial loan for this ETH. That's where we come up with pay as you go, pay as you grow. You can start off with $100, you can test this all out, you can cancel anytime, get that ETH back, but as you want to add additional services, you come up with different ideas, you want to try something else out, you are able to simply do that. You just go back to the app, you set what your new logic is, you decide how much ETH that's worth for you to have that covered, and there you go. Now we're getting into the reporters. These are the Vigilantes. It is a completely ad hoc network. These are the slashing mechanisms where people can come in, anybody can be a reporter, download the simple software, and any sort of that logic that the middleware has outlined, these are the ones that are enforcing it. They're super lightweight, zero-knowledge proofs. So again, you have your old smartphone. Nobody wants to use their old smartphone, but if you can use your old smartphone to make a little bit of money, buy yourself a new smartphone, that's where the reporter comes in, because it's so lightweight, it's completely automated, anybody can run it, which really gives so much additional decentralized support to this restaking network. It's not one person who's enforcing slashing, it's anybody who wants to enforce the slashing can enforce this slashing. So here's a bit of a diagram on what this could look like when we're talking about an ad hoc ZK network. We have reporter number 1 here. They're always online. They're made a business out of it. They want to make sure that they're going to catch every slashing report that they can. They want to report. Reporter 2, currently offline, no big deal. Reporter 3, sometimes they open up the laptop, let it run. Sometimes they don't. They don't really care. Same with reporter 4. Here's really an overview of what the reporter does. It's ad hoc network. Anybody can join or leave anytime. There's no penalties. They're not putting up any additional capital at risk. So what they're able to do is they can just, when they're online, they can get paid. When they're offline, they don't get paid. And all of this payment that they're getting is in ETH. There could be some separate agreements where people are getting paid ERC20s, but the whole crux of restaking, staking and now restaking is ETH. And these reporters, even though it's ZK Tech, it's super fast. We actually have an implementation of this already in another one of our protocols, the reporter. Now we made it more generalized for Restaking Cloud, but it's already live in mainnet if people want to check it out. It does, it's milliseconds of time it takes for these reports to go through and be verified. Now, there's this concept of preferred reporters as well, where people can build out specialized services, specialized reporter services, but there's going to be a lot of basic stuff for people to run as well. So now, where do we go from here? We've got a lot going on. Let's figure it out. The preferred delegations and preferred reporters. So from the onset, everything is generalized. Anybody can be a middleware, anybody can be a restaker. Everything, it's perfectly matchmaking type of system. But as things progress, people, as they get more and more sensitive information or more and more sensitive like protocol operations that they want on restaking, we can add in these preferred delegations. And what that could look like is a protocol could say, hey, I need 100 ETH at stake of security, and I trust these particular node operators. Maybe they want to go with solo stakers, maybe they prefer to go with commercial node operator or their friend, doesn't matter. And they could have a separate agreement saying, if you're going to provide my ETH at stake, I'm going to provide you some additional incentive. Now, even though the pool is completely auto-managed, what this will do is completely section off a piece of that ETH at stake for them. So if liquidations do occur, or if restakers decide that, hey, I want to leave because there's nothing holding any restaker there, they're able to know that they're at least covered with these particular people. Now, on the other hand, preferred reporters are also very interesting because there could be specialized services that are run off of these. As the more and more I talk to people, the more ideas they give me on how this stuff can be ran. And this preferred reporter was actually from somebody else outside of our organization who came up with some of these ideas, saying that they could run services that if there are liquidations, they can essentially cover that and make sure that they're the ones who are winning these ETH bids and making sure that these people are made whole afterwards. Is this another app chain? Not currently, but it will be. And I'll tell you why. Because when we're talking about slashing and when we're talking about this base level where we're talking about right now, we're on the infrastructure layer where there could be slashing and liveness, and these are less frequent types of events. It doesn't matter as much, but the costs of ETH are going to get more and more expensive. So as this develops, what we're going to do with Restaking Cloud, is deploy a separate app chain for it. And what this allows for is these super fast interactions where people can access these reporters, access ETH at stake, similar to an API point, without actually needing to spend all of that ETH gas cost. A lot of yield going on here. So when we get to the yield, where are we at currently? We have staking yield, we have MEV, we have LST Fi, all this amazing stuff. Now, how do we add on this ecosystem yield on top? And that's where people who are coming in as restakers, they're staking a token. they automatically get this LP token. And this LP token is yielding in ETH from all of the different applications that are building on top of Restaking Cloud. Now, this is powerful because they don't have to worry about anything besides that their ETH value of this token is accruing and accruing. Now, this token, because it's a simple ERC20 LP token, can be reused in DeFi. It can be used in literally any different ways that people want to do, and it'll just accrue, and accrue. We're looking at about a 5 to 10% APR is estimated for the restakers from the onset, all in ETH. So we want to grow the Ethereum ecosystem. And to do that, again, we want to keep solo stakers safe. We want to make sure it's fully inclusive. Anybody who wants to join can join on any level. We want it to be completely available, and we want full participation from anybody who wants to. That's why we made the reporters so simple to run, is because those reporters can be anybody, old laptop, old computer, run it. Restakers, anybody using native delegation. 860,000 validators are available to natively delegate, plus the LST tokens. And we want to make sure that those people, the base network, is not at risk. So how can you get involved? There are really 3 different ways to get involved. There's the low lift. You can restake your LSTs. You can do your native delegation. And that keeps things very simple for people. They just come in, they just collect more and more ETH. Now, what somebody else could do is they could say, hey, well, I also want to run the reporting software. They can download that software. It auto updates. It's very simple, lightweight, very easy to do. Now, the heavier lift, obviously, you want to develop an application specifically for restaking or increase the security of your app. That is all possible as well. Now, somebody could also come in here and say a middleware or somebody building an app chain could have a bunch of ETH at stake as well. They could also become a reporter. So what they could do is they could ensure the security of their network. They could hedge off some of their costs with being restakers themselves and have their app be run. So this is something super powerful for people who are already working with staked ETH, who already have signing keys, who already have LSTs, whatever it might be. They already have the node infrastructure. People can kind of pick and choose, right? So it could be very easy for a solo staker to use native delegation, just basically sign up with their signing key, and then set their fee recipient. They're done. Then they could run an additional software. They could run this middleware on the same machine, get paid for that as well, and they can just sit back, collect ETH. And that's what we have. So thank you, everybody. Are there any questions?
So you made this quite bold statement that you can just earn another 5 to 10 or 5%, 10% with these restake initiatives. Where do they come from? It's usually always a risk-return question. So additional yield or interest doesn't come for free.
Right. So that's where the middleware is actually paying for access to this ETH at stake. If you look at it, where the middleware are the ones who understand what the risks are to their application. The middleware are the ones who wrote the contracts. They know what they want done. So it's more like they're paying for a service, and what they're doing is they're paying to get access to this ETH at stake. Now, they're doing this in the 2 different ways, where they're paying interest on the ETH that they want to borrow, and they're also paying every time that they have a different type of slashing event, whatever it might be. And because the middleware are taking on this risk themselves, and it's not a separate party, they're actually able to do this with essentially a bit of leverage. So they can pay more for access for less. Slashing events might hurt their position a little bit more, but they understand the risks that they're taking. So the actual ETH stakers, or restakers in this circumstance, can get more yield for their ETH.
Other questions? Okay, then let's thank Derek again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next talk is in 10 minutes.